So good evening, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be here tonight. As she mentioned, I am a ministerial student here at Seaside, at the San Diego campus. It's located right here. So I have gotten to know, your ministers and some of your staff and some of the congregation, and so it truly is my pleasure to be here tonight. So when Reverend Sunshine asked me to do the talk tonight, she asked me to put it together around the readings that you're doing. So there is a list of readings. If you want, they're available in the social hall. But basically every day there's a reading. And the readings for this week have been around physical perfection. So, basically physical perfection. There's some meditations in the back that are really quite lovely. And then Ernest Holmes also has done some metaphysical interpretations of the Bible. That's also in your Science of Mind text. And so a little bit of that reading. It's been very, very lovely knowing that I'm reading kind of what you're reading as I went along with the preparation for the talk. So my talk title tonight is Why and Why Not? And so what I'm going to talk about is really a focus on physical perfection. That was a whole section out of the book. And so, why is it that Ernest Holmes has that in there? What does he mean by physical perfection? He's saying that physical perfection is the truth of you. So what exactly does that mean? We'll get into that a little bit. And then why not? Where is it that why not kind of shows up in our lives sometimes? Where is it that when we want to be physical perfection, we know that the truth of us is physical perfection, but we're not really seeing it in our lives. So why not? So we're going to talk a little bit about why that shows up, and then what do we do? What's our part in moving back closer to the physical perfection that is the truth of us? So you don't have to answer this by raising your hand or anything, but just think about this for a second. How many here in the room look in a mirror and go, oh my God, that is physical perfection? Well, I know I don't, personally, but I do have an example of somebody who does. I have my middle son, he's 24 years old, and I swear to God that he cannot walk past a mirror or reflection in plate glass window, reflective chrome, bumpers or anything, without kind of stopping and looking and just being in awe of himself. And personally, I'm very glad that he's gotten to that point, because when I first met him, we adopted Dylan and his brother, and I actually have another one that we adopted. And when we adopted Dylan, I met him first on the day after his 13th birthday. And he was a little bit short. I used to stand behind him and kind of lean over to put my, my chin on top of his head. And so he was worried about being short. And he had freckles. He had these dark freckles that were across his cheeks and across his nose. And he was so worried about that. But Gabriel, my partner, and I would tell him, don't worry about that, because you're going to grow, and those freckles are going to fade. And by the way, those are sexy freckles. The girls are going to love those freckles. So, in fact, he did grow, and he did fade away the freckles, and there he is now where he just loves himself. So good for him. But me, when I look at the mirror, I start going, I'm not so sure. Could lose a few pounds, and gee, where did these crow's feet start coming from? I'm looking like my father, and oh my God, where did the hair go? So, physical perfection, and I'm being very light on the physical perfection right here. We'll get a little bit deeper into that, but, we all kind of look at that, and, we may or may not, depending on us, decide that we are physical perfection. So, let's start talking about why Ernest Holmes thinks that we are physical perfection. Why is it that the truth, the very truth of us, is that we are physical perfection? So it really, for me, it comes down to a couple of core concepts. We could get down and look through that. So if you've taken foundations, you'll know there's 10 core concepts that we learn in foundations, and I'm going to use 2 of them. The first one is that God and I are one, right? We all know that one. There's no separation between God and myself. Whatever is true of God is true of me. And so, what do we say God is? We say God is wholeness. We say God is order. And we say, some of us say, although, among practitioners, what makes that list or not is a little bit of discussion, but some of us say that God is perfection, right? And I kind of like perfection, so I use perfection. So God is wholeness, order, and perfection. So that's one thing. If that's true of us. But then there's another part of it, which is we say there's a creative process. One of the very axioms we use is there is a creative process, which goes like this. All of us share the mind that God is. There's only one mind. We think into that mind. The law, which you can think of as just being this pure, wholesome, but not, it doesn't take it and spin it in any way. It takes what you think, and it has all the potential that God has, because it is God, and it moves it into form. So it takes what you think, moves it into form. What is form? Form is what we see, what we feel, what we think. It's our feelings. When I say I love you, I'm really talking about a form, right? So when we merge those two things together, we think God is wholeness, God is order, God is perfection, therefore I am. The law takes that and voila, there you are. You should be physical perfection, right? So when I'm actually a physicist by training, so if I did that, if I was a physics professor doing that in class, I would write on the board QED. Basically, it's Latin for it's been demonstrated. So basically QED on that. We're gonna take that at faith. And we're gonna move on to why not. So when we're asking about why not, what we're really doing is we're asking, why is there disease? Why is there something less than the perfection that God is? Why would that come about? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that we have free will. Remember, we create out of that, and we want to create out of the wholeness and order that God is, but we can think whatever we want. There is no thought police in God. You don't think something that's a little bit off from that, and the thought police come and take it to jail so it doesn't create. The truth is whatever we think is creative. And there's even more to it than that. That's conscious thought. What about unconscious thought? Right? We all have, no matter what we're thinking about at the moment, we also have these tapes that are going on in our head all the time, right? And the tapes are basically the things that we thought in the past, and the things that we habitually thought in the past are the ones that run the most in our mind, right? So we have that, but wait, we're not done yet, because we don't think into a vacuum, right? There's 7 billion people thinking just on this planet alone. God only knows what's out there, right? But on this planet, there's 7 billion people thinking into that mind. And there's all the people who have thought into it before, all the people who are ever going to think into it in the future, because there's no time in God. So, we can get there, that we are perfection, but there's these ways of kind of creating and form other than that perfection. So, some examples of the why nots. We talked about the why. Now the why not, a headache, a cold, something more serious, maybe cancer, birth defects, right? These are all things that are why not. So I know that that's kind of a heavy statement, and that might take you to a heavy place. So, one thing that I want to really stress is this is a loving community. The one thing that I've known about Seaside is this is such a loving community. There are practitioners here who are always here and available to pray with you, right? And prayer, that we're going to talk about in a minute, is the way to move us closer to that why, right? To that physical perfection. But there's also classes that you can spend more time than the 20 minutes or so I'm going to talk to you. So please avail yourself of those services also. But what we really want to do is not focus on how it happened, but if we're over here feeling like our life is not quite physical perfection, then what do? Well, we want to focus on healing then. And let me just tell you a little bit about what Ernest Holmes, our founder, says. He says about healing, while we maintain that disease is primarily a thing of thought, we do not deny the actuality of its experience nor the suffering it causes. Instead, we seek to heal it. And we cooperate with all, no matter what method they are using to relieve the distress. So what that means is in religious science, that may be different than some other communities, but in religious science we say, go where you're called, right? If physical perfection is not, you don't feel like it's the truth of you and you want to move more towards it, go wherever you're called. Whether that's Western medicine, Eastern medicine, another faith down the street to pray. It doesn't matter, right? Go where you're called. So what we offer as religious science, though, is something called prayer treatment. And that's basically a revelation of what is the truth of you already, right? Prayer treatment is not about putting something in the mind, right? Because thought is creative. We're using that thought as creative, but it's not about directing something in the mind. It's about knowing the truth that's always been there, that's always there. And so we reveal the truth with our prayer treatments. But I want to tell you to be a little bit careful about being directive in prayer treatment. Because in your readings for this week, Ernest Holmes says, too much cannot be said against. So I'm going to say that part against because it's a little confusing. Too much cannot be said against the belief that willpower is creative. We do not will anything into existence. If you want to try it, try willing $1 million into your bank account and come back and tell me if you're successful. I'll share it with you. But, we don't will that into existence. What we do is we know the truth of God. We align ourselves with God. That's the way to be creative. So, the simple truth is the more that we focus on how to get from point A to point B, whatever point A and B is, if we're plotting the path from point A to point B, we're really kind of doing it wrong. We need to allow God to move the way God moves. We need to know the truth of ourselves and allow God to work through what? Not willpower, through the law, through that creative power that I talked about just a minute ago that takes thought and moves it into form. So the law, very similar to, out of the Bible. I'm going to read you just a quick verse out of John 14:10. And it says, do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his work. That's the new version. I forgot exactly what it's called, NRV. But it's the new version of the Bible. If you might be more familiar with it out of the King James Version, which says, the words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself, but the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. They're talking about the law, right? The law does the work. Not me. I don't have to do anything. I just have to know the truth. Right? So the readings are telling us that physical perfection is the truth of us. And if that's not our experience, then we want to go into prayer treatment, in order to know the truth of ourselves more fully and move ourselves back into that physical perfection or closer to that physical perfection, actually revealing that truth about us. So I want you to remember something out of this week's meditations. I love this part. It says, "Look out and see thy good. It is not afar off, but it is at hand." Look out and see thy good. It's not far off, it's at hand. And then the last line of the meditation is, "Rejoice that the perfect whole is so completely reflected through thee." Know that. Know that is the truth. So I've been in the head a little bit, right? We've been talking about things where we're thinking about it, right? So I'd like to spend a little time taking you to the heart. And I'm going to do that by telling you my story. On Pearl Harbor Day, 1994, yes, December 7th, 1994, a day that will personally live in infamy for me, I walked into my doctor's office and he told me that I was HIV positive. At that time, in 20 years ago, somebody the statistic was that if you were 20 years old and you were diagnosed with HIV, that you had a life expectancy of 25, which means you had 5 years to live. And so I walked out of the doctor's office and I was, say devastated was a little bit light, right? And, I didn't really know anything about science of mind. I was a physicist. I was somebody who knew things with my head, right? And so those statistics were real to me. The statistics meant I had 5 years to live. And so I spent that time, I started going, well, what's in my life? Well, I love my work. I've spent a lot of time getting to where I am in my work, so I put lots of me into my work, even more than I had before. And I excelled. I got promotions, I got raises, I got awards, all in a very short time, actually. That was my intention. I didn't understand intentions were so powerful, but boy, that was it, right? I just skyrocketed at work. But one day, not quite a year later, I was sitting down with my friend June Sias that I'd known for quite a few years at work. And I was sitting there and we were chatting and she just stopped and she looked at me and she said, "Scott, you've been sad for a while." I went, wow. In my head, I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. I hadn't really thought about it that way. And I wasn't going to tell her because it was the middle of work. I wasn't going to announce, oh yeah, I'm HIV positive, and oh, by the way, it's been almost a year, so now I have 4 years to live. But what I did do was I went home that night, and for thereafter I said, whatever time I have left, I'm going to be happy. Because happiness is where it's at. Right? Follow your bliss. I didn't know that, but follow your bliss. So, I decided to be happy. Not that many months later, I met my partner, Gabriel, who I've since married. We've been together for almost 18 years now. We've adopted 3 children. But, that was just the beginning. After a while, after I met Gabriel and things were going along, medications were improving a little bit, so things were pushing out. But I didn't really know how to create my life. Didn't know anything about science of mind, but I knew my back hurt. So I went to a chiropractor. And the chiropractor he was a very spiritual chiropractor, and he started talking. And I spent 1.5 years in his office. Not all at once, right? But, saw him 5 times a week for a while until my back started better, and then it was twice a week. But, he would talk to me. And I didn't realize it, but he was starting to connect my head with my heart. And then, my back felt better, so I quit seeing him, and he moved on anyway. But I found later, after that, I found Namaste, which is my spiritual home. It's in Long Beach. And I started learning. I started learning about the religious, science principles. And I started learning how we create, and oh boy, as a physicist, I'm like, I can engineer this, right? So I started praying for T cells to go up and viral loads to go down and all this stuff, and it wasn't working all that well for me. Because I was using my willpower, right? I was willing things along. I wasn't allowing God. I got a little farther into the studies and I realized, oh, wow, that was not quite right. How about I do this? So I worked with a practitioner. I was going to a practitioner regularly. I worked with my practitioner and we came up with a covenant. And let me tell you my covenant. I covenant with God for my health. I will do nothing to preserve my health. My health is the health of the Holy Spirit. And with that, I let go. With that, I knew the wholeness that I am. With that, I just let God take over. I let God have its will, so to speak. That's the way to wholeness. That's the way to perfection. Physical perfection. So in your reading this week, Ernest Holmes says, we must return the way we came as little children who know that life is good and to be trusted. We are not to approach our problems as though they were not. Approaching them in this manner, they will vanish. So if I trust God, if I trust life, my problems will vanish. So let me tell you about vanishing. Remember that statistic? Somebody who was 20 years old lived to be 25. Today the statistic is somebody who's 20 years old that's diagnosed with HIV, the life expectancy is 73. 53 years, not 5 years. And the last time I went to see my doctor, he sat me down and he said, Scott, he goes, if I didn't know you were HIV positive, I could not tell from any of the tests that I do. I couldn't tell. There is no marker that says you have anything. So I still take the pills, right? Because that's what's prescribed. That's what I've been led to do. But you talk about vanishing. That's, you could say this is because of science. And I'm a physicist, so I'll agree with you to a point. But I'll also say there was a whole lot of prayer that went into that. A whole lot of prayer. So what I'd like you to take away from this tonight is first and foremost, is that there's always hope. Right? Hope is eternal. Hope is what took me out of that office with June Saez and turned my life around. And there's always grace. Right? Grace is when you've completely screwed up your life in one way or another. Or your life has gotten screwed up. However that has shown up, it doesn't matter. But there is grace. There is a grace in God that is the truth of you. You get to move in a different direction than whatever there was. And I'd like you to know to pray. Pray constantly. Pray unceasingly. Pray to know the truth of yourself as the wholeness that God is. Pray to know that that is always your truth, whether you know it in the moment or not. Pray for yourself. Pray for your friends. Pray for your family. Pray for your community to know that. Pray for the world to know that. And turn control over to God. You can always trust God. God will be there for you. God will guide you. God will guide every person in contact with you. If you're going to a doctor, God's there. The nurse that's assisting him, God's there. Trust God. Always trust God. So I'd just like us to take that and let's go into some silence. Let's just go to a place that's inside of us that knows the life and the power and the presence that God is. Go to that place within us that just breathes. Go to that place within us which whispers to us always, 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 my darling, the beloved, that whispers that you are that which I am. That whispers that the truth of you is maybe not what you're seeing right now. But the truth of you is that there's love because you are love. There's peace because you are peace. There's wholeness because you are wholeness. There's joy because you're joy. Listen to that voice as you go down in your breath. Follow it down to your heart.
All there is God. All I am is God. I am is God.
All I am is God. There's nothing that's more truthful. There's nothing that means more. There's nothing that will ever, ever take us to a higher place than that. All I am is God. And God is all there is. And so as we come back into this room, we know absolutely that we are blessed. We're blessed with that knowing that God is all there is. We're blessed with the absolute divine knowledge that we are the life that God is. That God and I are one. And so I create and we create out of that knowingness. We create our lives. We create everything that is attached to it from that place of knowing that God is all there there is. And so I'd just like you to take whatever you brought out of your intuition today, whatever you heard out of your intuition, to bring that up so that you know it up here, even though it lives down here. It lives in your heart, and now you know it in your mind. God is all there is. You're just going to grab the mic here. My understanding of your service is this is a time for some sharing. So maybe whatever has come up for you out of the meditation, what has your intuition been telling you? Yes, Jenny.
Well, first I just want to share how much I'm blessed to hear you speak.
Thank you.
And that how much I feel the love and the sincerity, and then just the power and healing that you've demonstrated is such a gift to share. And it really reiterates my own practice,
Yes.
my own conviction.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to do my reading tonight, but in this week in the Science of Mind, it talks. One excerpt that I want to share is the thing of it's a thing of the way he describes it. Ernest is, let's say you have a cup of blue water, and then you keep dropping in, say, a bleach. And then the water gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And this is in doing the prayer, doing the meditation, doing this practice, and knowing that it's working, even though we don't see it or we don't feel it at the moment. And when they say it's working from the inside out, is what's happening. And each time, just like this drop of water, and it's getting clearer and purer, and clear thinking, right thinking. That's what I think in this whole practice. And what came up for me was, wow, this really does work. And the thing to do is just to keep doing it, keep practicing, and knowing you're getting stronger every day. So I'm very moved.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else have a thought from their intuition? There you go.
Two things came up for me, and the first that came up for me, is it on?
It is green, showing green.
All right, hello?
There we go.
Okay, a little bit closer. Okay. The first thing that came up for me, I loved your story.
Oh, thank you.
My husband is a scientist.
Yeah.
I wish he was here this evening, because your speaking is a voice that he understands. But he was also he does gene therapy. And his thing is vaccines.
Oh.
And so he was on a team in 1993 that was able to get the test for HIV to where you could see one copy instead of 400.
Right.
So that was an exciting turn. But my intuitive sense, as you're speaking, is I've had different challenges with health, where I had the opportunity to feel life breathe me through all kinds of calamity, and knowing that it always breathes you,
It does.
and needing to check back in with it and stay with it. And so that's
Very nice. Yeah, it does. It always does breathe us, doesn't it? We breathe in, and sometimes when we are at most trouble, what we really need to do is just remember to breathe. Right? What does that do? It takes us back into that space of knowing that we're in the cycle, that we're in that infinite cycle of in and out, giving, receiving the life that God is. Anybody else have an idea? Oh, yes. Hi, sweetie, how are you?
Good. My name is Nicolette, and I'm just very happy for you. And
Thank you.
It's really a congrats because it's very hard to, like, because time goes by quick, like I've told my mom. But anyway, I'm very happy for you, and I hope you enjoy it.
I do. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, 5 years is not much time, is it? How old are you now?
9.
Oh, see, almost double that, huh? Anybody else? Yes.
I'd like to say thank you, Scott, for your words this evening. And this reminded me that I started my journey in 12-step just after I found Science of Mind, the teachings of Science of Mind in spiritual community, although I had studied the philosophy many years before. And in 12-step, there's a saying that don't leave before the miracle. And how I've heard that before in my life is don't leave the meeting before the miracle, or don't leave the whatever it is that I'm in before the miracle. How I really heard that message this evening is don't leave this life before the miracle has a chance to occur. Checking out in all the different ways that I can check out and still be here on the planet, but totally checked out. So don't leave before the miracle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, you know, when I shared about throwing myself more into work, that's a form of checkout, right? And don't take it wrong, right? We all need to work, but when work becomes all that there is, right? When you don't have joy in your life anymore, then something needs to change. Yeah. Okay. You know, I really, really, really appreciate everyone that's here. I appreciate having the opportunity to share with you guys tonight. And as I said before, you are a wonderful community. You know, the thing that that brings us together into community is the part that we need to always remember to take home. Right? Remember that connection between each one of us, because we are so much stronger together. And when you need help, right, you need help for more than just you. Right? I have had the most wonderful community supporting me. I have my partner. I have my church. I've raised 3 children in my church, because it takes a village to raise children, right? It does. It really does. And so it's the community that you have here that you're building to be so strong, and that reflects your strength. The stronger your community is, the stronger you are. So thank you so much for coming tonight.